Howdy my totally as always tubular gamers, and today we're doing another ranking video, and today's going to be a bit of a sad one. We're going to be ranking all of the Unreal games. So if you didn't know, Unreal is more than a game engine. It is actually a series of video games created by Epic Games, back then Epic Mega Games, and was made to showcase said Unreal engine. This was back when, it hadn't taken over the industry like it has now. Now, Epic Games had made games before Unreal, but it was really Unreal that got the studio more so on the map and the engine on the map, and they started just putting out some bangers after that with the Gears of War series and more Unreal games, and nowadays all they've got is Fortnite. But it was really Unreal that got things started, got the ball rolling. After that first incredible Unreal that really showcased how powerful this engine was, Epic would move over to a multiplayer focused game known as Unreal Tournament. So Unreal and Unreal Tournament are the same series if you weren't sure, but yes, they moved over to Unreal Tournament, which would compete with Quake 3 in the 90s, and there'd be several more Unreal Tournaments throughout the years. Now, while Unreal Tournament does have a single-player mode, the series has always been very multiplayer-focused. In fact, Unreal is a very multiplayer-focused series outside of Unreal 1 and Unreal 2 The Awakening. And that's why I'm pretty sad to come in here and say that Epic Games is shutting down the master server for all of the Unreal games at this time. It seems that the servers will still exist if you've been playing these games, but there'll be no way to find them unless you use a community master server or you know the actual IP address. Now, I don't think anybody knows the actual IP address to some of these, so there'll be at least some community servers, but official support for the games are dying, which is really kind of sad to see. I don't think anybody really saw this coming, and I really don't see a reason why they should shut down official master server support for these games. Okay, yeah, maybe a couple of them for sure, but I don't see why all of them are getting shut down. Apparently, Unreal Tournament 3, I guess, is coming back in some capacity, but I don't see why basically all the games can still stay online. I get they want to have some uniform Epic Games server or whatever, but this is like drops in the bucket to them. This costs like almost nothing. Epic is a conglomerate nowadays. They also delisted all the Unreal games from Steam for some reason, so I guess the only way to get them now is like goodoldgames.com until those are taken down too. Why would you want people to not play your game? And it's just sad to see, it really is, that Epic is totally distancing themselves from the Unreal games, which is what got them popular in the first place. It's what their engine is named after, and I think it's safe to say that the series is dead. It is dead. They are not going to be making anymore. They're not even going to be supporting the originals officially anymore outside of Unreal Tournament 3 at some point. And so I thought I would rank these games from worst to best before the whole series goes officially offline. And by the time this video's out, you probably won't be able to play these games officially online anymore, and that's really just a shame. I've been playing Unreal for years. I've had tons of fun memories with this series, especially the announcer. And so join me and share some of your favorite memories with Unreal, or maybe what your list would look like, or your favorite game. Like, share, comment, sub, all that good stuff. We're going to be looking at one version of every game. We're going to be looking at just kind of, how much fun I've had with these games over the years. And I won't be including that latest Unreal Tournament that never released, since it never released, and it's clear now that Epic has no interest in continuing it. So I've had enough of an intro here. It's clear the series is just pretty much abandoned. What do I think is the worst of this series, though? And here we have Unreal 2 The Awakening, initially releasing in 2003. Now, Unreal 2, it was not part of the Unreal Tournament series that had really taken off and become Unreal's identity. No, it was an actual sequel to the original Unreal, and it was going to be primarily a single-player game. There is a multiplayer to this game, but trust me, it's been dead for well over a decade now. This is one of those games where I totally understand why Epic would want to shut down the master server. There's nobody playing this game, and there hasn't been anybody playing this game for ages. But again, it was primarily a single-player game, and it wasn't even developed by Epic Games. It was actually developed by Legend Entertainment. Now, I personally had not played Unreal 2 up until a couple years ago when I finally said I'm going to get to this game on my backlog and try it, and it really wasn't worth it. Unreal 2 is one of the most unremarkable shooters I've played in quite some time, and I did not enjoy my time with it. The game claims to be a sequel to Unreal Gold, but I couldn't find any kind of real connections here. The story's about former Marine John Dalton, and he basically gets called back into the service to retrieve 7 pieces of this ancient artifact to make some powerful weapon. There's a number of characters here, all kind of annoying, and I just didn't really care for what this plot did, especially by the end of it. I could not care less what was going on. The game tries to have this kind of like ragtag group of people, like with this woman and the robot, and I couldn't remember their names. I couldn't really remember their personalities, and I remember thinking like, oh, this could be, kind of like a fun little, almost like Guardians of the Galaxy kind of group. No, this is super generic, nowhere near as exciting. The characters were just not all that well written, and I really just didn't care for the characters or the story, and the game actually does have a decent amount of story to it, and I was like, there's actually kind of a lot of story here, and I don't think it's very good at all. Anyway, who cares about the story? You're just here for the gameplay, right? Well, if you're just here for the gameplay, you're going to be disappointed too. The game plays almost nothing like the original Unreal, actually. Like, the original Unreal was pretty fast-paced. You went through all these exotic environments. The game looked amazing for the time. It had a really dynamic day-night cycle, and it had some really satisfying gunplay. This game has none of what I just mentioned. You go through these incredibly generic environments, generic military bases, generic, like, alien-looking planets. Really nothing stood out here. Very unsatisfying gunplay. The weapons just feel nowhere near as satisfying or fun to use. The game is incredibly slow. You move at a very sluggish pace. It's really tedious, and the pacing of the game overall is just very poor. Graphically, the game wasn't amazing either. I mean, it looked pretty decent for the time, but it hasn't aged as well as other games from the year or the following year, 2004 being one of the best years ever for PC games. I feel like this game just shares like nothing with the original Unreal, and I don't know why it was even called this, to be honest. It's just incredibly unsatisfying gameplay, and I really just wanted it to end by the end of it. Luckily, it doesn't go on more than a couple hours, but I was like, wow, this sucks and has nothing in common with the original Unreal, like, at all, except that the music is pretty good. I'm gonna give it that. The music actually does slap, but Unreal 2... what a forgettable, lame experience. I've never heard anybody talk about this game, especially even when talking about Unreal games. I never hear anybody talk about it. And there's a reason, because the game sucks. And so here we have Unreal Tournament 2003 releasing in 2002. There was also the console port known as Unreal Championship. And I'm just putting both of them here because Unreal Tournament 2003 is, again, one of those incredibly forgotten PC games, really for one reason though, and that's that Unreal Tournament 2004 exists. Unreal Tournament 2003 has pretty much been forgotten by probably a majority of the Unreal fan base. I mean, the game was never even released on Steam. And again, this is one of those games that I would totally get why Epic would not want to support when it comes to an online capacity. There was probably like nobody playing this game. I only tried this game pretty briefly and don't really have much experience with it because after even a short amount of time, it doesn't take a data scientist to play and go, yeah, Unreal Tournament 2004 is just better in like every single way. The game did establish a lot of things that 04 would really capitalize on, but this game, all in all, it's really just not even worth playing. And I mean, when it comes to the Xbox version, Unreal Championship, I mean, that's been offline for well over a decade, and the single player in Unreal Tournament has never been remarkable, and it certainly isn't remarkable here. And with that in mind, there's just nothing really left for Unreal Tournament 2003, but to be honest, there hasn't been anything there for a long time. And so here we have Unreal Championship 2, developed by Epic Games and released in 2005. This game is obviously a follow-up to Unreal Championship, which in itself was just an Xbox port of Unreal Tournament 2003, basically. Now, this game has been offline for well over a decade. In fact, I think it's been almost like 15 years since Xbox Live got shut down, which is scary. In an unofficial capacity, I'm pretty sure this game is dead as well. And so I've only ever been able to mess around with the lackluster story mode, which didn't really gravitate towards me. The game was developed with a console in mind, so it definitely has console controls built into it. It has some cool third-person melee kills. And it tries to provide a unique Unreal experience. It's not just 2004 on a console, it is kind of its own thing. The game was actually planned to come to the computer at some point, but it got cancelled. And that's a shame. It really would have provided some longevity to this game. Again, the game actually has melee weapons, which was a first for the series. It goes third person when you're doing these like fatalities. Funny enough, the game was published by Midway, who also published Mortal Kombat. All of the characters actually had classes, light, medium, and heavy, that determined their health, their weapon damage, and their melee damage. And I actually thought that was pretty cool. Even their agility was messed with it. The game has a decent pace to it, and it's a shame that, yeah, it's only story mode, because I think the game could have had some longevity on the computer, or at least had something. It would have had more than 2003, I can give it that. The story mode, it just really isn't much But you know, this little story mode that is still here all these years later that can never be taken from us at this point because you just need the disc and an Xbox. I had more fun with it than 2003, the first championship, or even Unreal 2. I mean, I just don't like that game. But again, it's a shame that this is the state of affairs we are at with this game, and I think that this game deserved better. I really do. But hey, the game is super cheap thanks to it being just basically offline mode. And so if you see it at, your local retro store or garage sale or something, maybe it's actually worth trying. It might actually be worth trying. And so here we have the latest and presumably last Unreal game, Unreal Tournament 3, releasing initially in 2007. Now, Unreal Tournament 3 is sadly the only Unreal game that I've played really when it was in its prime. I played this game only a couple years after it was released. There was a ton of people playing it, and who knows, maybe it'll have a resurgence. It's going free to play as Unreal Tournament 3X. But despite actually playing a decent amount of this game when it had some popularity to it, I can easily say that the game, when it comes to all the Unreal tournaments and Unreal games, it isn't exactly in the upper echelon. Unreal Tournament 3 is still a really fun game, and I still have had a number of good memories with it, but I just think it pales in comparison to some of the other games. Again though, it is a fun time. I want to just put it out there, I had fun with this game, and something I can give this game mad props is the presentation and general graphics. It looks great. Like for 2007, it looked excellent. It looks good nowadays. There's a lot of detail. It's really edgy. Yeah, it does kind of have that Gears of War look to it that a lot of Unreal Engine 3 games did, but the game really does look superb. The music is also really good. And then we have this game's story, which is not very good. This is actually pretty different from the other Unreal Tournament games. It does not follow a plot based around the tournament grand championship. It's instead about Reaper, the edgiest name I've heard in a long time, who does not look like a Gears of War character at all. It's about his colony getting destroyed by these creatures and him taking revenge and joining a resistance to, avenge his colony basically. And how do they do this? They do a bunch of Unreal Tournament game matches, like that makes any sense. Yeah, the story is pretty damn stupid. It's easily the worst story in like all the Unreal series. The Unreal Tournament games never really had stories. They didn't need much more of a story other than some big tournament, and this is clearly why we don't, because when we have something more, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense and it sucks. But playing through the campaign is pretty similar to how it was in the other Unreal Tournament games, where it's really just a bunch of bot matches, where it feels like they seemingly grabbed random maps and game modes and just threw it together to make some kind of campaign. It doesn't exactly have a whole lot of cohesion to it, but it's something. Okay, so I feel like I've talked about everything but the actual gameplay of Unreal Tournament 3. The actual gameplay I think is still pretty fun, it is still pretty satisfying, and it definitely has that Unreal Tournament feel to it. It's just, I've always felt like this game is a bit watered down from some of the other Unreal Tournament games. When it comes to this game's weapon roster, maps, modes, and hell, even some of the gameplay itself, I just feel like it's nowhere near as good as 2004 and 99. The game for the most part is still pretty fast. It has a really good pace to it. There's some really small interior maps where things can get pretty hectic. And then you got your big battles that are a much more epic and try to be more like, say, Battlefield with an Unreal Tournament flavor to it. And these aren't as good. But those interior fights have always been my favorite. I really do love all the interior battles of Unreal. That's what I played the most of when I was playing this game back in the day. Your death matches, team death matches, and capture the flag. Unfortunately, some of my favorites like Bombing Run and Domination aren't here. In fact, the modes I think are just really lackluster actually. I don't know why so many of them just aren't here. We now have Warfare, which replaced Onslaught, and it's basically, pretty much the same, where you're in these huge, large-scale battles where there's a ton of vehicles and there's just a lot going on here. There is some fun to be had though. When it comes to the actual maps, unfortunately, I think a lot of them just aren't that well designed. There's a lot of dead ends, and I just think that the best maps really are the throwbacks to the old maps. I don't think a lot of them succeed. Now, when it comes to the weapons, they're all incredibly satisfying to use. It's all fun to use. Unfortunately, there's only like 10 to use, and there's nothing new here. Like, Unreal Tournament 2004 had almost double this amount of weapons. And I keep going back to 04 and 98, but this is kind of an iterative series. It's not like they're totally innovating here or reinventing the wheel for Unreal in general. It's kind of more of an iterative series. And The game just feels like a little bit of a step backwards in many aspects. But again, I will reiterate, I've had fun with this game. I've played a number of hours with this game. The offline bot matches can still be pretty fun, and that's all we're going to really have. Maybe the game will resurface when it's free and get a lot of people playing it, but I am a bit disappointed they chose this game to be the only Unreal game that will be officially supported. I don't think this was the choice. But here we have the game, and I mean, it's still fun to play, and there is still some fun to be had here. So when it's free to play, I mean, I guess check it out. Alright, and so here we got a real classic. We have the original Unreal Tournament, developed by Epic and releasing in 1999. Now, the original Unreal Tournament is really considered one of the very best online games, one of the best online shooters. Back in the day, they actually had a pretty fierce rivalry with Quake 3 Arena. It's pretty clear which one won, since one of them's getting shut down. But that absolutely does not deny the legacy that this game left. This game has just produced a ton of fun for so many different people, and it's pretty great to see that even in 2022, there is still people actually playing this game online. And you know, I'm sure once Epic shuts it down, people are still going to find ways to play this original game online, because it really is just that much of a classic. Obviously, it was very multiplayer focused, but the game can still be played with offline bot matches. The game has a story mode, air quotes, but there's really not much here. It's just kind of like a tournament. And the most fun I've had with the game was definitely in these offline bot matches. I think that these have been a real blast, and you can just set up a ton of fun matches with a bunch of interesting modifiers and just go nuts with it. There's so many, like, endless possibilities, all for a bunch of fun. The game has a very fast pace to it. You definitely need some decent reflexes and some good aiming. It still feels great though. Like, honestly, the gameplay really hasn't aged all that much. Yeah, it does feel a bit old school, you know, with like the ammo pickups and how fast it is and all the jumping around, but it really doesn't age all that much outside of like the presentation, because it still feels really nice. It's still incredibly satisfying. A lot of these weapons are just total classics. The game still has a great roster of weapons. It has more than Unreal Tournament 3. And when it comes to the maps, these are some of the best maps in Unreal Tournament history. Like, there are so many classics here, so many well-designed ones. All the interior ones are just fantastic. And even some of the larger maps are actually really great also. I would argue that there's really not any bad maps here. I think they're all pretty solid, and they've all been really fun to play on throughout all these years. The game has a number of different game modes to it, all of them all very unique, and there's a bunch of different modifiers you can add here, not just in the bot difficulty, but you can add just a bunch of crazy stuff, like if you want infinite ammo, if you want way too many people on a map that doesn't have room for even 5 people, let alone you've got like 20 in there, you can totally do it. You can go nuts with this game. They really just kind of opened the field gate and were like, here, do whatever you want with these maps, and whatever you want, you got it. You want low gravity, you want instant gibs, you want to jump super high, you want weapons that just destroy everyone and explode, you got it. You got whatever you want, and that's the fun of Unreal Tournament. Oh, you know, and the multiplayer. The online multiplayer, I was unfortunately never really able to play any regular matches. Everything I always played online was pretty custom server, pretty custom this and that. It did have the regular announcer, though, who's just totally epic and has become just iconic to gaming. Like, seriously, the announcer is just fantastic. In fact, the presentation itself was fantastic. The game looked great for the time. It didn't look, you know, like top of the end, but it still looked really good. And the music is just some of the best music you'll find in any first-person shooter. Like, I really do love the music in this game, especially the Deck 16 map. Like, that shit is just good. But yeah, at this point, this game is pretty much goated. It's just a legendary game for all the reasons I've mentioned. It's still incredibly fun nowadays, and it's a shame that you won't be able to officially play it. But again, I'm sure plenty of people will find ways to continue playing this game, because it really doesn't matter what year it is anymore. People are still going to be playing this game. And so here we have the original Unreal, releasing all the way back in '98. The original Unreal was not only a great showcase for the original Unreal Engine, but I think it's just a great game overall, and I would argue that it's one of the more underrated shooters from the 90s. Now, I've heard a lot of good things about this game, I've heard a lot of people talk about it, but I never see it brought up in the same conversation as, say, the original Quake or even Half-Life, and I think it is almost as good as those games. It is obviously very different from the rest of the Unreal series, being primarily a single-player game. There is a multiplayer to it, but I've never honestly tried the multiplayer. I've only ever played the single player, and the single player is very different from what you would expect. There's like some actual story here. You play as this prisoner who basically escapes, and you end up on this planet known as Nepali, home of the Nali, a primitive tribal race. And they're pretty pacifist, all things considered, and really they've been subjugated by the Scar, a race of brutish but technologically advanced reptilian humanoids. They were the ones who shot down your prisoner ship, actually, and were going to kill everyone, but your character is able to escape. And really it's just all about trying to survive on this planet and figuring out what's going on and eventually freeing these people. I always thought the story of Unreal was really intriguing with all these interesting races, and the game actually has a fair amount of lore to it and backstory, and the way the storytelling is done is actually pretty different from games at the time. Now, while I think the world and story are actually pretty interesting, especially compared to the other games, I think this game has just an incredible atmosphere that has never been achieved with the rest of the series. This game really has vibes to it that are awesome. Like when the sun sets with its dynamic day-night cycle, which is crazy to even think about, it really just sends chills down my spine. Like it really just hits different. And the game looked amazing for the time. It really was a powerhouse when it came to these graphics. And I think that the graphics have actually aged incredibly well for the time. And then this game, when it comes to the music, oh, the music is so good in this game. I still listen to the music of Unreal Gold because it's just legendary. It's so good. But the actual gameplay, it's a pretty solid first-person shooter. For the most part, it is relatively linear. It is pretty fast-paced, and it plays, you know, kind of like how most old-school shooters played at the time, where you have just a boatload of weapons, a bunch of different ammo types. You go usually from point A to B, sometimes having to find what is essentially a key card. In this game, they obviously have much more dynamic names for them, but you basically are solving the occasional puzzle, some item hunting, and just killing a whole lot of these reptile looking things. And I gotta say, the gunplay is actually incredibly satisfying in this game. It still totally holds up. It feels really nice. This game has a lot of really cool weapons to it. And I think that the highlight is definitely fighting these enemies. The AI is actually pretty decent. Also, they can totally kick your shit in. And I've always just had a really fun time with the gunplay, and it feels really nice. All the weapons really do feel nice. The game is decently fast-paced. It actually has a pretty good pace overall when it comes to the campaign, and it keeps things moving and keeps things interesting. There's a lot of variety with the environments. You really are exploring this planet, and it feels like an unknown world. Again, not just because of the atmosphere, but just how different all of the areas are from each other. And I think for the most part, these levels are actually really well designed, especially the outdoor areas. I think these are just expertly designed, actually. I would say that they really add to the atmosphere. But it's not all perfect. I will say, especially towards the later half of the game, the indoor areas are just like a freaking maze. Like, this game gets so confusing, and there were a couple times where I just needed to get the walkthrough out because I could barely even figure out where I was in this structure. And it doesn't help that sometimes this game can be just dark as hell. Like, it can be hard to see even, but for the most part it's fine. But despite that, I mean, I still had an absolute blast playing through this game, and I was not ready for it to end. Luckily, the game actually has an expansion to it now if you're playing Unreal Gold, and this adds a bit more. This is not as well designed as the main campaign, and it's not as fleshed out, but it still totally is a decent addition to the overall package. I have no problem recommending the original Unreal to anybody who likes shooters, or if you haven't played it at this point. Since the game was primarily single player, nothing's really lost with them shutting it down officially. I don't know why they delisted it. That's a bit unnecessary. But hey, if for whatever reason you have never tried the original Unreal, I really do think you should try it. I think it's not only still a game that totally holds up nowadays, but I would still argue that it is probably one of the best shooters of the 90s. Alright, and so here we have Unreal Tournament 2004, developed by Epic and put out in 2004. Now, UT04 really is just goated. It really is the fan favorite. Not only is it the highest rated Unreal Tournament, but in my opinion, it really is the best of the Unreal Tournaments. Like, it's not even close for me personally. Despite me not playing it in, you know, even the 2000s, there was still always a ton of people playing this game online. Even up until the game getting officially shut down, there's still people playing it, even to this day. And the community has already prepared on how to play the game without the master server. There's an unofficial one that you can install so you can still use the server browser. Obviously, I'm sure only the hardcore, dedicated fans are still going to be playing at this point, but I mean, it's better than nothing because this game is still totally worth preserving, and I really don't know why they would want to shut this game down, honestly. This is like the most popular of the Unreal tournaments, and if you were going to choose just one to keep, it should have been this game. This game offers way more than any of the other Unreal Tournament games, not only in its base gameplay, but its community, its mods, its custom servers. It's not even close. The game looked pretty great for the time. It still has an amazing soundtrack. Of course, it doesn't look as good as Unreal Tournament 3, but it doesn't really matter because the gameplay is way better. You have an excellent variety when it comes to its maps, its weapons, and just general gameplay. There are so many different modes here, and there's just so much. Like, all the fan favorite stuff for Unreal is here. Like the announcer, like some of the great game modes that didn't come back for some reason. Some really kick-ass weapons. The game has a great pace to it. It does have a single player. It does have a story mode, air quotes, where it's really about this tournament and you trying to, win the tournament. It's pretty goofy. It's pretty silly. It was never meant to be taken seriously. And I mean, it's there. It exists. Nobody really cares about the story though. Really what it comes down to is just a bunch of random bot matches, which you can also get in the instant action mode. I've had a ton of fun over the years just messing around in the instant action mode, just like Unreal Tournament from the 90s. You can just mess around with a bunch of offline bot matches, have a bunch of crazy mutators on, and there's way more options here than ever before. There's all these new game modes. Some of them are these really large scale battles that even add vehicles, and these aren't actually that annoying, unlike Unreal Tournament 3 where they can get a bit overboard. Here they're actually, I think, pretty well paced. I think they're pretty fun. The vehicles are fun to use. Really, like, you want to know what game is fun? This game. This game is just the definition of a fun first-person shooter. It's just a crazy time where they give you a bunch of cool weapons, a bunch of awesome, well-designed maps, I might add, a bunch of interesting different game modes, and say have at it. And people absolutely did, because there's just so many different ways you can have fun with this game, whether you're playing offline or online. The game absolutely holds up in just about every aspect. It still feels great. It still has an amazing pace. It has aged like the finest of wines to really become one of the greatest first-person shooters like of all time. And that's why, again, it makes me really sad that they didn't choose this game to be the one that's officially supported anymore, because this game is just the best. It is some of the most fun I've had with any shooter ever, and it really is just an excellent game. I'm at a point now where I don't even know really what there is left to say about Unreal Tournament 2004, because I feel like everybody's already sung its praises for like 20 years, because it's just that great. It was amazing when it came out, and it's still excellent now. The amount of content you get is just unparalleled. You never get even half this amount of content nowadays with a game. Or if you did, it would take like 2 years of updates and some live service crap to even get, again, like half of what this game offered. And then there's a bunch of community servers, there's a bunch of mods. Like my favorite game of all time, Killing Floor, it started as a mod for this game. And so I really have nothing but the highest of praise for Unreal Tournament 2004. It is just a fantastic time, and it's a real shame that Epic stopped with Unreal Tournament. I think that we could have still had a game that could have been better than this game, but at this point, it's clear that this is where the series peaked, and we're not going to get one that's better than 2004. I'd love to know anyone's favorite memories with the series or 2004. Let me know down below whatever you're feeling. If you made it to this part of the video, comment bricks. We love Unreal. It's just a lot of Unreal love here. And I hope everybody has a fantastic day, night, whatever is nearest to you. See you later.